It is day 21 of the shutdown, the government shutdown. It's unclear when this will end. I know that by November 1st, people have to start buying their healthcare on the marketplace. I know I do. And we don't know whether our premiums are going to be going up, an insane percent. And, there's also, I believe, come November 1st or come next week, maybe you can clarify, SNAP benefits are going to be running out for millions of Americans. And to say nothing of the 700,000 furloughed workers. We're still in this shutdown. I'm worried about flying, like air traffic controllers, TSA agents. Tell me about this moment and like what move the Democrats have been making here, what move the Republicans are not making, and why we are where we are.
Certainly. So just to put it in perspective, right? Because even as we talk about things that have happened before, we still have to recognize that everything that happens now is happening in a new era, a new regime, right? We've had government shutdowns before. Arguably, this is the first government shutdown in what is objectively an authoritarian regime. So just thinking about the ways in which they have been escalating their tactics, the ways in which they have been just mask off attacking federal workers, right? Because the attack on federal workers didn't begin with the shutdown. The attack on federal workers has been ongoing all year. He's been, firing them, attacking the federal unions, the federal worker unions, so even now threatening those workers who are furloughed with, withholding their back pay, right? Ongoing. The attacks on Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP benefits, social safety net programs. On the other hand, also, they've been just aggressively, viciously attacking them. So right now, the way that I unfortunately see this is for those working class folks, it's like most vulnerable people in our society. It's, like in those movies, like those Indiana Jones movies where you see like the spiked walls closing in on one side, right? On one side, it's like on October 30th, that's a paycheck day, November 1, right? November 1st, folks got to pay their rent. They have to pay, whatever other bills they have and still do all of the things that are still expected of them in a society where folks who have jobs are expected to do those things, right? Mm-hmm. Then on the other end, the healthcare crisis is a very real crisis, right? People are already getting their notification that their premiums might triple, might double. And, that's unconscionable. So I think that what's happening here, for the Democrats is just this recognition that we can't keep letting people drown. We can't keep allowing the most marginalized people in our society to be used and sacrificed over and over and over again. And then also, yes, we recognize that we are negotiating with bad faith negotiators. So it's when the shutdown started happening, that was not the first day that we mentioned the fact that these healthcare tax credits were expiring.
Yeah.
It wasn't. So, that it just shows that, Republicans don't care about these folks. That's why, Mike Johnson hasn't called us back. He doesn't care. He ain't working class. He doesn't have to worry about missing a paycheck and doesn't worry about his healthcare going up. So they can't even relate to what people are doing, and they're willingly using these folks.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it is also a stopgap measure to use a government shutdown, and I have thoughts on, I wish Schumer had done this, back in March. When I think, it would have had more leverage and maybe stopped some of the most egregious things in terms of the attack on federal workers, or at least attempted to, and holding up the budget, which I think was really important. But now we there's other reasons, right? Like, I guess what I'm saying is like, it feels like one very small tactic, but an important tactic nevertheless. And apparently Democrats are also, voters are like, yeah, do it. Like, this is important. Let's do it. Yeah. And there's another reason why maybe Mike Johnson doesn't want government open. And that is because, I mean, he basically called an early recess, if you remember.
This ain't the first time. This ain't the first time. Like, this man has been dodging work all years because these Epstein files are haunting this man.
Exactly. The Epstein files, he called an early recess because the Epstein files were coming down the pike, and you've had a role in trying to trigger a House vote or push a House vote to release some of these files. Tell me about where this stands, what your role has been in all this.
So, that a lot of us believe that the reason why he is not bringing us back right now is because he doesn't want to swear in Adelita Grijalva, who would become what is the 218th person, which means that we now have a majority of people in the House who want the Epstein files released. Now, saying that, we already did this. The reality is we already did this. Like you're mentioning, I think back in July, literally, it was the last thing that we did in the House. We still had the subcommittee hearing where I was the ranking member. And it was a subcommittee hearing where we were talking about child sex trafficking. And here we are talking about that at the very same, or we're pretending to talk about that at the very same time that Mike Johnson is trying to run us out of town early so that, he can stop, his own members from demanding the release of these files. So we saw it as an opportunity to do a motion to subpoena the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
And, to our, delight, Republicans joined us. So that was actually legally binding then, right? That subpoena to get all of the Epstein files. And people ask us often, like, oh, this is going to be redacted. Well, I'll tell you what. Our subpoena calls for the full, complete, unredacted files, but for the names of survivors, right? So nothing else should be redacted, right? We call for that. That motion is legally binding, which means that the Department of Justice is actually compelled to do it. So they're still stalling. Of course, as you all might remember, they did the first tranche. That first tranche was, a lot of information that we already know exists.
Yep.
But they've been stalling since. Trump tried to say that they don't exist. Even though Pam Bondi says she's sitting with the files on her desk. We've talked to some of the survivors. They've come to talk to us, to tell us to keep digging. They said keep going. There's so much more to see. And right now, we're so close to the accountability that they deserve. You can see it in the way that they're panicking. You can see it in the way that they're starting to circle those wagons again, right? Protecting, their wealthy interests. But it's starting as a house of cards and it's starting to collapse. We saw it most recently with the prince over in England, who, is finally, meeting accountability. We're going to see it. We're going to see more. But that's what we are right now.
Yeah, and today, the late Virginia Giuffre, who was trafficked by Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell, again, who clearly struck a deal with the president's personal lawyer to get herself moved to, Club Fed, as they call it, a very low security prison, someplace that a sex trafficker should not be, especially to the degree that she, was involved. She came out with a memoir today, obviously posthumously, and details of the horrors that she endured while being trafficked by Epstein. And I think it's really important. We have to remember, look, Trump didn't find her to work at Mar-a-Lago, but she worked at Mar-a-Lago when she met Ghislaine Maxwell. Why? Because Maxwell and Epstein were at Mar-a-Lago. These guys are neighbors of Donald Trump in Palm Beach. They're all neighbors. They know each other. That's how she was even trafficked. And again, yes, Prince Andrew and the horrors that she endured with him. There is an unnamed prime minister that people are speculating. I haven't seen it confirmed, but that is the former prime minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, who abused her in the most graphic ways. So this is it's very inescapable. I do think what I appreciate about someone like you leading it is or being part of it, is because I know where your values lie. I know that you want to get to doing the real work for the American people when it comes to addressing needs around healthcare and housing and, climate change and all of the things that you have fought for. And the Epstein files matter, and it matters to hold powerful people accountable.
Absolutely.
And it's not a distraction, right? It's actually very central.
The only people who are saying it's a distraction, which is a small group of people, because, right, they woke up one day and they realized that even their base was calling for this, right? Fundamentally, Americans are tired of this idea that rich, powerful people get to live one way, they get to live by one set of rules, and everybody else gets to live by another. If that's what brings you to this, then I think that is perfectly fine. Because you're right. Just because somebody is a billionaire, or they know a billionaire, or they know a president, or they know a prince or a king, does not mean that they should be able to victimize people. But second, this is so many people talk about, the survivors of especially childhood sexual trafficking. And we're talking about the most prolific sex trafficking ring in American history, outside of enslavers. And to see, we know it wasn't just two folks. It wasn't. And the fact that people are bending over backward, like this is obstruction from coming from the White House. This is obstruction coming from the highest levels of our own government and other folks' governments. When we think about how deep this really is, right? So many people who are being protected right now, who are walking around, and what do? When folks get around without accountability, they go on to harm more people. So if you're somebody who believes in, just justice and accountability for the survivors, then this is something that we need to focus on because it doesn't get bigger than this.
Yep. I just want to play this because, in the same press conference that Mike Johnson is applauding Donald Trump for tweeting an AI video of him dropping poop on protesters, this is what Johnson had to say about Adelita Grijalva, who is waiting to be sworn in by him.
I will administer the oath to her, I hope on the first day we come back, legislative session. I'm willing and anxious to do that. In the meantime, instead of doing TikTok videos, she should be serving her constituents. She could be taking their calls. She can be directing them, trying to help them through the crisis that the Democrats have created by shutting down the government.
Just don't do TikTok videos. No, if you're not sworn in, you can't take a vote.
Not only can you not take a vote, but you don't have resources, right? He's talking about why doesn't she pick up a phone and call her and answer her constituents? Well, she doesn't have constituents because she remains a representative elect without a staff, without the resources to buy an office, without the resources to buy a phone. People think that stuff just comes, with the office. That is just not true. You have to build your office. And the fact that she has now been sitting here for basically a month and can't start that process, is a big disservice. So, I mean, aside from that being a whole load of bullshit, right? Also, let's agree. I'm certain that she would love to go and serve her constituents. Why don't you empower her to do that?
Absolutely. I remember the question I wanted to ask you because we do know that actually, like, Congress is getting paid while the government is shut down. Do you agree that Congress should be paid when a government is shut down? Where do you stand on that?
I think it's a terrible situation. I don't agree that anybody shouldn't be paid. I think that right now, while we're looking at like the White House construction, and you're going to convince me, like the White House construction, the White House lights are on, and the houses, the Capitol Hill lights are on. Why are we not able to put aside money to pay people who are doing really important work? That doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. I don't like, even at certain state levels, you don't see folks going unpaid just because there's a government shutdown. So I think that that's irresponsible off top. That our folks are working without pay or that they aren't able to work is ridiculous. I think we can solve that. As for member pay, here's my deal. On the one hand, I absolutely understand it. Like, I won't even lie. I just talked to like federal workers who are genuinely like, I don't know how I'm going to make it this month. We're talking about how we can coordinate services, mutual aid.
Yeah.
For folks in our community.
I mean, you have military members in waiting in line at food banks.
You do. And on the other hand, I do recognize also that I think that what people are really yearning for, they're like, I feel like these members of Congress wouldn't do this if they had to suffer through it the same way. And it's also just not true. I have colleagues who are billionaires. Yeah. Right? I have colleagues who are billionaires. This paycheck isn't their main source of pay. Like, they're not doing it. So on that one hand, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we're all coming into the negotiating table, even. I want to make sure that as somebody who represents a working class neighborhood, that I'm able to fight for them working class people as loud, as long, as aggressively as folks who are coming, who trade stocks, who own half the houses in their district. I want to be able to fight on the same page as them. And my district deserves for us to be able to do that. So I'm not even going to say I'm torn. I'm not torn about whether Congress should get the money. I'm torn about whether or not federal workers should ever be able to withhold their pay. I don't think that those folks should be living like that. So I get it.
So it's basically like the people who are in the pocket of the billionaires are not, it's no sweat off their back if they're not getting paid.
The political answer is like, we should all be withholding our pay. But I just know that that's not going to solve our problem.
Right. They'll do it. They'll still do it anyway.
This is going to make working class Congress people, we do exist. It's going to make those folks, have to buckle under pressure. They're not going to hold out for the longest deal. But it also means that we shouldn't be fighting. We shouldn't be in a shutdown if we don't believe in this. Yeah. We should never bring our people to the precipice like this if we do not believe that the thing we're fighting for is worth throwing down for. I believe that healthcare is worth throwing down for. I believe that back with the big, beautiful bill, I believe that was like saving Medicaid was worth throwing down for. Some of the folks didn't. I think that this system is terrible, and it harms these people intentionally. It uses these federal workers. It uses our neighbors, our family members on purpose. And I think we need to get to the heart of that.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.